So, something that can really help in situations is understanding that a child's behavior is often as a result of their inability to communicate effectively. This is in situations that are common. However, there are situations where this isn't necessarily the case. It just kind of depends. Like I've said, every kid is different. One size doesn't necessarily fit all. So, as a child, you do not have the same brain capabilities or capacity as an adult. And so, being able to rationalize, problem solve, and communicate effectively of these different things that you're experiencing and verbalizing your emotions and what you're feeling can be really, really difficult. And they can often just do what first comes to mind and not recognize that it could be a bad or good choice or things like that. So, a good way of remembering and practicing this kind of understanding is using an acronym SLOW, SLO, which stands for Stop, Listen, Observe. And so, for stop, pretty much stop what you're doing. Truly stop, take a second, and pay attention and give this child your time so you can kind of figure out and observe what happened that led to this point and kind of figure out what necessarily triggered their response. And so, for example, I had a kiddo in a classroom who they ran out of the classroom. I was out in the hallway and I was able to bring them back into the classroom. And I honestly did like a reverse of their response. I took them back to the classroom the way that they had come rather than going into the other door. And once we got back there, I asked the teacher who was closest, okay, what happened? Why are they responding in this way? And that allowed for us to make an appropriate response. And then listen to what the child is saying or what is going on around them. Is the environment too loud? Are they trying to tell you something and just not in an appropriate way? So, for example, sometimes a child may be trying to communicate something with their actions or with their words, and you sometimes just have to stop and slow down and allow them to explain it to you, and then observe who is around the child and what might have contributed to the outcome and to the situation. So then you respond rather than react. Responding is doing it in a way that is calm and thoughtful, whereas reacting is your immediate response. And often that reaction isn't necessarily a positive reaction. And so look at the situation and try and figure out what you can do to help calm them down. So either through sensory techniques that like I've explained or redirection methods that would allow for them not only to have a better outcome, but also for the child to have a more positive experience out of it. So for example, I was in a Sunday school classroom and I had a child who refused to sit at the table. And I tried to place a demand on the situation by having them sit down at the table, and they began to try and run out of the classroom. So when I slowed myself down and I actually tried to put myself into the situation, I understood that their thought process and kind of recognized that the activity that they were being told that they needed to do used glue and markers. And before this, the child had actually was showing me their new shoes and how excited they were about them. And they told me that they didn't want them to get ruined. And so I knew that the child also does not like having their hands sticky from the glue because it's just overstimulating for them. So what I believe happened was that the child believed by engaging in the craft and by sitting at the table that it could have caused their shoes to get ruined. And in the situation that we were in, I did not necessarily appropriately respond in the way that I now realize I probably should have. But that's the good thing about kind of taking a step back and thinking through some of the situations and being like, okay, how can I better respond in the future? Because it's always a learning process. So, what I should have done is stop and have the child come over to me and calm them down and then have a conversation about the situation. Asking the questions, are you afraid to get your shoes ruined? Or do you not want glue on your hands because it is sticky? Then provide alternatives or explanations like, what if we take your shoes off and put them in your mailbox so that they don't get ruined? Or I can get you a wet wipe and that way your hands won't be sticky, um, and you can just wipe them off right away. And by giving these two options, um, and if those two options didn't necessarily work, I could have provided different activities or see what choices the child necessarily wanted to make. Because I would also suggest that you don't necessarily have to get a child to sit down and engage within the activity. I mean, that's the ultimate goal, I would say. But in the same token, the Lord will work in this child's life while they're just in the classroom itself. And it's okay if they're not necessarily sitting at the table and engaging in the activity as appropriate. Instead, they're engaging in a sorting activity or things like that, and that's okay. Um, and so, yeah, I would say that the SLO would be a good starting point of slowing yourself down, listening, observing, and figuring out, like, okay, you're almost putting yourself in this child's shoes of like, okay, why are they doing this? How can I respond in a way that and ask questions that could help me understand what's going on, but also help them be able to understand the situation as well. So